You often hear people say things like positive vibes only. Popular self-help books tend to reinforce the benefits of positive thinking, and it makes sense. Better internal dialogue can change our outer worlds. But I personally tend to feel at ease around people who are comfortable with the full spectrum of emotions, not just the positive vibes. Life is a series of dualities. Accepting the highs and lows makes sense to me. We can't appreciate positivity without learning from negativity. The pressure to be happy tends to make us unhappy. After all, happiness is often rooted in our expectations. We compare ourselves to other people and wonder why we aren't as content as everyone else appears to be. When we aren't happy, we become convinced that something is wrong with us. But what if not being normal doesn't make us broken, but different? This is not to lessen the severity of mental health issues like mania, psychosis, suicidal ideation, and self-harm. There are too many symptoms that can make life unbearable. But I want to share what I learned from a dark spell in my life. In 2012, I had a head-on collision with my own mental health. I had a mental breakdown. This was the year that my brother was murdered. The shock and pain and confusion pushed me into chronic thinking. I was not only devastated, but irreversibly changed. I felt as though I was here, but not really here, as if I was a spectator watching someone else's life pass by, only it was mine. Things that used to be my main interests had zero appeal. I didn't keep up much with friends. Time on my own suddenly felt crucial. I spent a lot of time reading and searching and exploring. After reality smacked me with the fragility of our finite existence, unknown to me at the time, I was desperate for a new way of being. I only knew I was suffering a breakdown in retrospect. I felt different. I didn't think I was the healthiest, but I'd learned it was better to lean into uncomfortable emotions rather than to completely dismiss them, because they never truly go away. They just show up in other unhelpful ways. To the best of my ability, I learned not to judge myself in this new shift in being. I was more intrigued to find out what these emotions had to teach me instead. I realized a lot of the discomfort I felt during this period was the beginning of change. Maya Angelou says, "Nothing worth having is easy." And I believe this too. Learning to accept myself was the biggest challenge I face and still face today. Because it's easier to remain in your comfort zone. It's familiar, it poses no threat to your immediate reality. I had to admit to myself that things were really changing. I painfully accepted that I had grown apart from some of my friends, those who once brought me comfort through my ability to blend in. I had to teach myself that standing out wasn't a negative, but a necessary requirement for anyone intent on getting to know themselves. I found a new interest in my environment. I became fixated on psychology, philosophy, sociology, and renewed my interest in literature. Becoming aware of how fragile and untimely life can be made an urgent sense to be present in everything that I did. I wanted to learn how to strengthen empathy, compassion, and kindness, qualities I see disappearing from the social revolution we're currently in. If I didn't administer these qualities to myself, I may have overstayed my welcome in that dark place. My own suffering reminded me that we all have a unique battle that everyone is unaware of. During my lowest points, very few people knew what was going on. This illustrated to me how easy it is to bury your pain in chit-chat and small talk. Those who did spend a little time with me took my difference in attitude to be a personal attack. Change is uncomfortable, especially for people that you know well. I had to learn not to judge this, but to understand. People can take offense to your change if it reminds them that they might be the same. Keeping this in mind and realizing how easy it was for everyone to judge me during my lowest points, I vowed to become more curious than judgmental about everyone I meet. Getting to know other people and providing non-judgmental spaces allowed me to better understand myself. This didn't mean that I agreed with other people and everything that they said. It didn't mean that I condoned it either. I simply gave people the space to air out what is otherwise kept in, turn into resentment, and in worst cases, hatred. I realized I couldn't control other people, what they say and what they think, but I can learn to respond instead of react. I decided to be analytical instead of dismissive, even if I disagree. It dawned on me that intimacy isn't only romance, but it's also the capacity to see people beyond their exteriors. When you're passionate about social issues like the environment, race, gender, feminism, or politics, it's easy to see people as two-dimensional. It's not entirely our faults, though. This type of thinking is popularized on the internet. Considering we're in the gender revolution, the internet really encourages binary thinking. You're either good or bad, problematic or progressive, the left or the right. The danger here is not only that we flatten conversation, we scare everyone into having the same beliefs. The risk of a social exile can be scarier than death itself, and the evidence of this is in those who've taken their lives due to online bullying. But our online culture has an imprint in what happens in real life too. It's exemplified in how we treat those who have different opinions. We've all seen so many celebrities get dragged through the streets of what I call wokeness. I am completely in support of using our voices to demonstrate our unhappiness with the system, corruption and sexual abuse and much more. If not for so many of these brave stories, many of us would never have gained the confidence to share our stories and, more importantly, to stop them from hanging shame over us. But abusing someone for being ill-informed or not informed is not quite the same. When we are patient enough to imagine other people's realities, we understand things aren't as simple as good or bad. I'm no longer interested in what is happening in the world, as I am about why it's happening. For me, this is to learn to focus on the cause and not the symptoms. Once we can do this, I really believe that we have a stronger chance in moving forward collectively. But I've been just as horrified as the rest of the world at issues that have come to light. We can take the recent example of an actor, Jussie Smollett, who faked a racial hate crime during a time of political unrest and racial divide. Not only did this incident waste police time that could have been used more productively, it arguably runs the risk of undermining the credibility of hate crimes. Jussie appeared on live TV and cried about an incident that seemingly didn't happen. The last 2 weeks saw a number of memes, jokes, outrage, and outright disappointment about an actor some have grown to love. The internet has given a range of diagnoses. Some have called Jussie a narcissist, a pathological liar, or an evil opportunist. While I understand and don't condemn the outrage, I wonder how far this helps us in preventing and understanding issues like this. Are we worrying about the symptoms or the cause? Are we worried about why it happened or just that it happened? What struck me about the case is the confidence Jussie had about the attention that he would garner. There seems to be a social currency attached to victimhood, a romanticization that is depicted in Jussie's actions. Although Jussie is already famous and deemed successful, to claim victimhood shows us that our model of progress is fundamentally damaged. But is Jussie the only one capitalizing off social movements to bolster his brand? You could call it an epidemic. Music artists have adopted the language and movements of the time to provide a backdrop for their sound, because they too feel the pressure to present as ultra-progressive or super woke. For even celebrities know that there is a harsh scrutiny about staying silent on issues that matter. There are many young people who feel the pressure to politicize their difference as a way of acceptance. I've met many young people who've expressed that they feel guilty for not being angry, for not considering themselves to be oppressed despite having a marginalized identity. I've even had one person I know go as far to ponder if she even is capable of empathy because she failed to share the same outrage as her peers. This illustrated a profound and uncomfortable picture. Social issues have been commoditized to the nth degree. Publishers, journalists, film and TV are desperate to incorporate these new attitudes for profit. We all know that outrage sells, propels, and even leads to fame. Many people fear being irrelevant or deemed unimportant without any visible hardships to unleash. It's as though we believe that to suffer is to be virtuous. What I learned from this public spectacle is that it might be more useful to share perspective instead of publicly condemn. We can unlearn thinking of oppression as a gateway to moral purity. We can stop believing that privilege affects your capacity for empathy. It is my belief that the current social climate gave way for Jussie to wish to deceive the public and possibly damage the lives of 2 innocent people and his own career. But just like the complexity of mental health, symptoms do not always tell the full story. Refraining from eating if you have an eating disorder doesn't mean it's about food. There are deeper reasons as to why things are happening in the way that they do. As mental health advocates, we must learn not to condemn every symptom we dislike as toxic, for we at different points are all capable of being so. In our darker moments, what we may call retreating from the world for self-care, others may call a neglect of friendship, because life is all perspective. Labeling everyone toxic for a difference of opinion is not only a gross simplification, it is discouraging, and it can lead to a self-fulfilling prophecy. People can easily think, well, what's the point in changing if this is how everybody sees me? We fall into these traps by thinking that good opinions make good people. But it's actually how you treat other people that determines the virtue of your character. But if we see ourselves as superior for good opinions, we run the risk of swallowing the very poison of some of the ideas that we fight against. My biggest dream is for us to arrive at a place where difference is not only a threat, but celebrated, where we are not led by our fears, but our desire to understand rather than berate. A place where we can understand that self-awareness is more crucial than social awareness. Because to change the world is to change yourself. It's not only going out there with signs and joining protests, it's how you choose to treat people each and every single day. The people that can't do anything for you, the people who aren't your friends, and especially those people who don't share your beliefs. It's easy to judge the darkness in other people when you have forgotten or become unaware or deny the darkness in yourself. Those who are passionate about change and want a better world must recognize that to discard everyone for a difference of opinion is to weaken the unity of those committed to change. Many of us are headed to the same destination on different buses. As long as that destination is the same, how we get there isn't as important. But what is important is how we treat those who differ from us, not just via a marginalized identity or those who share our mental health diagnoses, but with those with different beliefs. Or we run the risk on uniting on what we are as opposed to who we are. We often think that to be radical, we must be prepared to fight. But I think to be radical is to be soft, compassionate, understanding, curious, and gentle. These qualities aren't encouraged enough. Psychologist Carl Jung says, thinking is difficult, which is why most people judge. It takes a hardness of mind to become soft. It's not a weakness, but a strength. Once we stop believing that our opinions define us, we may recognize that we have a lot more in common with people than we do apart. And I think this could be a really helpful start.